Those who met Francis, I think most words that they'd use in any talk would be nurturing, encouraging, frustrating. He was hard but fair, and I think anyone who talked about Francis could give examples. I've got three main big regrets in my life. One, when Barber was alive, I didn't take things as seriously as I could have. I missed the opportunity to love, to learn. That second regret is the same applies to my father, and the third regret is the same applies to Francis. I was given incredible opportunities, and I know that I did not accept what was being so lovingly offered. So I've got regrets. One thing which, with Francis, and my father, similar thing, weren't very true of Avatar's Abode. The job's worth doing, it is worth doing properly.
Yeah, that's all.
And
Excuse me, Bernard.
That's all that on ready to be served.
Oh, okay.
so I'll finish this part of the talk in 1 minute, seeing it's not quite 1 o'clock. So there's a lot Joanna's shared so much of, I could give other examples, I guess others could too. So after lunch, I thought rather than talk about me, I'll use Francis's words. We know from Joanna, from Robert, and me also after lunch, Francis invested hundreds of hours in encouraging, constructive criticism, nurturing, and what I will share with you from his words, I'll try and concentrate on things he said about Avatar's Abode, his concept of it, and working on Avatar's Abode. Francis, who valued his time, used to also like to have a walk. And it was, although he was usually charming to people who said hello to him, he often would rather structure it so he didn't have to say hello and have a talk. And so one of his little tricks as he was out walking the roads and paths, if someone was coming towards him, he'd put his head down, Barber, 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 until they went past, and then he'd get on with his walk.
It's a good strategy.
This to do with Barber's Room. So many of these letters that Robert read from this morning, and I'll be reading from, are so well crafted, and obviously so much thought has gone into them. I suspect that even though at the time Francis was very specific about limiting their circulation, I think it was probably his expectation that they might one day be published. I'm not suggesting he was sloppy writing letters, but so much of what I'm going to share with you, surely that's written by someone who expects it to be as we are today, sharing them. This is to do with Barber's Room, written in very early 60s. It seems that the purpose for which the Barber Room in the Barber House should be used is not quite clear, and in the case of visitors, who should and should not be allowed to go into it. The easiest way of arriving at this is by understanding that the whole of Avatar's Abode should be regarded as a workshop, a place where we work at becoming Barber workers. The room that beloved Barber worked in is the core, the shrine of the place. Barber worked in this room. He did not sit in it and dream about how wonderful he is. At what did he work? There is only one work Avatar does on earth, and that is implanting love of his name in our hearts, or more precisely, opening our hearts to the extent that we can bear so that his name manifests in them. It behoves us then to use his room only for the purpose of continuing the work in ourselves that he started. This can only be done by repetition of his name, not by meditation or by peaceful feelings, and most especially not by brooding on our troubles, often called seeking answers to problems. In the first place, Barber does not set us meditations, and in the second place, there is no answer to troubles or problems. They simply have to be replaced by knowledge. To seek answers to them is to give them reality and hence permanency. The path beloved Barber has set for us is that of love and knowledge. Repeating his name and working together in a spirit of service encourages love. Thinking about his life and trying more and more to understand his words encourages knowledge. Repetition of his name is the most important, for in his name are contained all things. This, of course, shouldn't be reserved only for a special time or occasion, but should become a habit during one's everyday activities, and also can be done in one's own room. But if one wishes to carry out block repetitions, that is, a certain number of such as half hour or 1 hour, then one can, if one wishes, go to his room and do them. All we have to understand and convey to others is that his room is not for enjoying his atmosphere. That can be done anywhere around the place if that is all one wants, but is a workroom in which to do the hardest and the most loving work. For the average visitor, as for ourselves, it is much easier and more generally practical to do some plain manual work. Visitors who sort of come under the general heading of Barber lovers should be encouraged to do some small job within their capacity. Let's sit in the sun, or under a tree, or let read in the library. Visitors who are just casual or a bit interested should be given a cup of tea and talk that makes them feel happy with their visit, so they go away feeling perhaps that they should like to come again. Written in September 1960, I'm just going to read a note at the top of the letter. This letter is not for general circulation. To the old, fixed in ideas, I say peace. To the young, fluid and seeking, I say awake. But the young are not to take anything I say here or elsewhere as true. Its purpose will be served if it helps them to start thinking for themselves. March 1962. It was the habit of those at the abode, usually when they could think up a good excuse, to do a card and send to Barber. Francis in correspondence encouraged this and would give feedback on our cards, and we used to often take it in turns as to who'd make it and what design, etc., etc. What I'm reading now is an extract. I was delighted with your birthday greeting card to beloved Barber, so simple and clean and full of space that he was very pleased with it. And rather sweet little song was heard by him twice. I really spend a lot of time thinking about you all and about his place and its future. And it is really a fine compensation to see such a thing as that greeting card. Everything any of you do for him and do well gives me much happiness. But it is particularly good to see you rising to an occasion such as his birthday and turning out something real fine. I use fine in the real sense of fineness and fitness. We can do this all the time, and we do it every time we forget our silly selves, because it is our very nature to do good work. It is so simple to do good work, just as simple as to love. Of course, one must persevere to master any job, i.e. master the materials and technique of any job. no amount of love and desire to express oneself will do it. There must be a steady practice. This is no more than digging an irrigation channel for the water to flow along. And this takes a lifetime. Quote, it's words I don't quite get, the lift so short, the craft so long to learn. This taking a lifetime does not depress one, for the digging itself becomes a delight when one digs with delight. And of course, when a little water flows along the channel, as in your greeting card, the encouragement is mighty. The time will come when good work and everything will be the normal thing, the habit at Avatar's abode. If this was not as clear as daylight to me, I would not have inaugurated, Indians love funny long words like inaugurate, the workshop. In many little ways I can see that we have already begun to do good work. Work for beloved Barber. All we have to remember is that it takes 10 years to become a good tradesman, whether farmer, carpenter, metal worker, poet, musician, cook, housekeeper or painter. But of course, one does not think in terms of 10 years. One simply does each practice thing one does as well as they can. 10 years go by and one discovers that one has a sort of fluency. With Francis, so much of his letters were directed about this place and was a lot of encouragement for the arts. There was one, what I got from Francis was, it's the long haul here, 700 years. And, you know, every bit of wire chucked over the shoulder to rust away is going to be a curse for someone else in another 50 or whatever. Like, it certainly has shaped me a lot in terms of being involved with this place. It is very much the long haul. I will tell you something very wonderful and amazing and lovely. Barber once said, "It is infinitely easy for me to manage the universe because in the first place, the creation, I took infinite care over it. Now it practically runs by itself." This should be marvellously encouraging to us. All we have to do now, each time now, is to take great care with our creation. Later on, it will practically run by itself. In 1963, this rainy, I thought of you when I included this quote. As I wrote you, your birthday card was most enjoyable. It was the most enjoyable I've ever received. Well, you can add a new step. The East-West gathering of 1962, which I toiled on mightily to complete and place at beloved Barber's feet on his birthday. It is an entirely new type of thing, a mixture of prose and verse narrative and commentary, interspersed with songs in praise of our beloved. I completed its performance before beloved Barber and the Mundley this morning, some 3.5 hours spread over 4 sessions, which would make a nice item spread over the 4 nights of his anniversaries. This is the first year he was in India. I have really just sat down to send you my loving greetings. Perhaps some of you may also be sending yours to me, and they may pass somewhere over the Timor Sea and greet one another in passing. But I know that just my love will not satisfy you. You want me to go into a lot of ridiculous talk about what can't be talked about, namely Barber. One of you, during our previous period of writing, hoped I was making notes about everything that beloved Barber said and did. Well, I did make an attempt. Through Barber's beloved Myra gave me a lovely diary, and I did make a few entries, but it was impossible to keep it up. The longer I am with this man, the less I have to say. But of course, that is not true. After my first meeting, I had nothing to say. Then the tears flowed, and after them the laughter broke out. Then I wrote the Dawn Through to Sunrise series. After Maribad Savas, I had nothing to say, only singing Threshold, etc. After Beacon Hill, contrary to what Jonah was saying, after Maya House, Avatars Abode Savas came Stay with God. So what have you all to complain of if I have not, during my stay here, written you reams about Barber? And how will you be able to find fault with me when I come back and have nothing to say? Love is its own language, and if that does not speak to you, you are not lovers. He bought a return ticket when he went to India. Barber had, in June 1958, intimated that Francis would, this is what we were told, that Francis would probably be called to India. And Francis, in this correspondence, he talks of, when I come back, and infers it'll be soon, and he talks about preparing for anniversaries and how Barber might be coming again and we have to entertain him properly. Barber never told him to go, and he cashed in the return ticket. Going on. So I warn you, you'd better stop being so dependent on the words of thoughts and feelings and start looking into your hearts, which are just wells of love. Then Avatar's abode will become an abode of God. Barber is in each one of your hearts. He is no more here than there. So if you want to hear news of him, look into your hearts and write me about him. Then you yourselves will also be getting news of him. But in order to start looking into your hearts, you will have to start and stop looking at yourselves, whether you are succeeding or failing, whether you are pleased with another or displeased, whether you have acquired a little knowledge about something or not. Because your hearts know nothing of these things. All they know is their deep love for Barber. But I can see you are not to be put off even with the words of good counsel. So I'll have to try and tell you something about this man called Barber. I've been giving some thought. This is you music people who were talking about his art yesterday. I don't know a verb from a crotchet, but here's something that Francis says about music. I've been giving some thought to Western music and the quarrel between intellectual and heart expression. Generally, those who enjoy classical frown on folk, and those who like folk think that classical lovers are wooden heads with no feeling. Having at different times of my life been an addict of both sorts, I think these opinions are largely due to lack of appreciation of fundamental qualities. There can be no real art without a balance of intellect and heart. The mature classical composer could not have been without heart, or his music would not have survived. No one will listen for long to mere intellectual exercises, and his would lack that tenderness which moves listeners. The maker of folk song or of instrumental pieces, all of which are on natural dance rhythms, could not have been without intellect. Otherwise, he could not have sustained his line. All real art bears the unmistakable stamp of honesty and sincerity and fitness to its purpose. If we take that trouble to try and look at things in their own light, in their own fitness, a lot of distinction will disappear. One will be able to enjoy the Andante con moto from Beethoven Opus 131, or the Siciliano, thank you Sam, from the Bach G minor sonata, and an early English folk song or a flamenco guitar. The quarrel is, I think, essentially merely a preference for structural or lyric expression. I think the highest praise that Barber gave Stay With God was, quote, "It will appeal both to the highest intellects and to those with simple heart."
That Andante con moto is even Beethoven said he wept while he was writing it.
What's the tune, sir?
Da dee da, da dee da da dee da dee da da.
This is back to 1959. 3 days ago I had nearly a 2-hour private session with Barber, reading him portions of letters I have received from yourselves and others, and talking about the future of Avatar's abode. Barber himself brought up the subject and said it will become a real abode of God. I reminded him that he had said that when he was here, but it was in the context of after 700 years. He replied that I need not worry about after 700 years, that it would be much sooner than that. I said that was good, as I was not very interested in what something will be in 700 years. He said that when he had finished the phase of his work in connection with which I am involved, I will be returning there to Avatar's Abode to take up his work there. That was written in 1959. So, Eric, in my opinion, Francis had clear expectations of being back here soon after he left. So I will repeat what my idea of Avatar's Abode is and what the word Barber lover means to me. My picture of Avatar's Abode is a place where people for the next 700 years will come to offer selfless service, to repeat Barber's name, meditate on the miracle, which is his life at this time in the world, and study his recorded words with the desire to become real Barber men and women. A few to stay or be sent elsewhere to do Barber work directly. Most to return and take up their jobs in the world as living examples to others. When this picture, which is now only a dream, materialises, it will be an actual abode of the Avatar, God, a place of real love and pure knowledge. As you keep this picture in mind, so will the relationship of each of you to the others and the part each of you can play in helping to make this dream a reality becomes clear to each of you. Barber said, "Come to me and give me something of yourself, not to try and get something from me." Real study on his person and life and repeating his name is never for the purpose of getting something, but is an offering of one's state of unlove and one's degree of ignorance to him, the giving of oneself as one is for his real love and pure knowledge to remould for his purposes. So much of what he wrote, the hundreds of hours of it, it's so well crafted. It's my personal belief that it's appropriate for the Avatar's Abode Trust when they've got the resources and time to get a lot of this material published. Francis said so much that just because I had the personal contact, what I learned from personal contact, I think, is very similar to what others learnt from their personal contact or his own writing. And so I don't think I can present something unique there. The only thing perhaps unique I got from Francis was I was named after him. It was Bernard Francis Brabazon. That's where the Bernard came from. So that's my little bit of uniqueness.
I have a story that relates to Bernard and Francis. We were talking about the place earlier on, Gayndah, when Bernard had been away up at Gayndah. I don't know whether you were teaching or picking oranges, but I've been picking oranges here at Palmer's, so I was fed up with it. And I was out the front here with Francis, and Bernard comes down with these beautiful half a dozen labels or something like that. I said, "Oh God, no, Francis, shut up." He walked up and, "Thank you, Bernard."
Yeah, I did mention before lunch he was very frustrating, and at times he was the most impractical person, which the first time I stood up to Francis, I still think I made the right decision at the time. Mud outside our house, which was the original road into the property, every time it rained, it was just incredibly muddy. And I mentioned how I was going to dig out all the mud and put in some proper road base. Oh, no, that's not the way to do it. You know, he's had the experience, worked in the land, a corduroy road, which I'd never heard of. It's saplings laid across the road. And I said, no, I don't want that, Francis. I want edges where I can mow. That'll be a nuisance forevermore. No. Anyway, he turns up with an axe a day or two later. Come on, we're going out to cut some saplings. I said, no. He says, with the corduroy road. I said, yeah, I'm not interested in them. He says, I'll have to do it by myself. And he went out and spent a couple of hours chopping them all down. I think when he realised I wasn't going to come and carry them back, he lost interest and went home. That was the first time I challenged his authority and showed perhaps disrespect. But he had so much that I regret that I didn't take more notice of so many things. Yeah, he was, he used to, this is now back in the 70s, we used to talk about English soccer and TV, and he used to poo-poo it, but then he'd call in and watch it for 10 minutes, and got to the point where he was coming back each week. Quote, to him, soccer was poetry in motion. One thing comes to mind, but I'm not saying this was the most touching moment, but the most touching, but might be of interest. I don't know if I've shared this publicly or not. Francis was my de facto godfather. I always felt free to discuss absolutely anything. And when, there she is, Joanne and I back in 1970 were getting to know each other, and Joanne was a rather traditional church-going Christian, and our relationship was reaching the point where it would obviously develop more, but the brakes could perhaps still be applied. I went to discuss this idea of Barber lovers and non-Barber lovers forming relationships. He let me splutter on for about 10 minutes, just keeping quiet, and his silence let me splutter more. Anyway, the gist of it was, he says, Bernard, it's really quite simple. It's two people. What really counts is a remembrance that each one has their ideals, their aspirations, what is really meaningful to them. And if the other party can contribute to the aspirations and values the other holds dear, that's the basis on which a relationship can take place. After 36,
6
years, whether I've been quote Barber lover and Joan being quote non-Barber lover, to me I've experienced, it's a meaningless concept. I'll just share that, but that came to mind when you asked most intimate moment. No, it was not the most intimate, but...
Before I actually came up to Advertising Road to meet Francis, Bernard gave me some of Francis's writing to read, and it was... his writings of the more wholesome variety, shall we say. And I was not really very anxious to meet this person. It didn't sound like too much of a fun guy, to be honest. And so it was with a lot of trepidation that I came up here to meet him. And it was just... the most overwhelming sense of relief when I met him. he was just lovely, you know, and just a sense of humour about him, and lightness, and he just so different to what I expected him to be from these wholesome writings. And as soon as I met him, I felt very, very comfortable, and went on to become even fonder of him as the years went on.
The culmination of this story was, to me, something I'll never forget. And quite a few in this room there will recognise what I'm saying in a moment. Taking on the theme of Joanne and I, Francis, one night we played table tennis or something, and there was a wedding about to take place, and in his grumpy manner talked about, and I suppose it's appropriate I get you some sort of wedding present, what would you like? And I immediately said to Joanne, please don't answer that, because I said, and then I said to Francis, okay, if we get back to you on this one. And yes. Anyway, my suggestion I shared with Joanne, she agreed to, and I went and saw Francis and said, yes, thank you, Francis. What, well, Uncle Francis, what would you like as a song at our wedding? And then about a week or two before the wedding, he just casually mentions to me, is so-and-so coming to the wedding? I said, yes. So-and-so, yes. No, 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 yes, no. I think it was 7, 8 or 9 no's. And he said, you'll have to invite them. And I said, no. And he says, yeah, you've asked for a song for your wedding. I have to have singers. So we couldn't argue. So this private, quiet little wedding, you know, suddenly went up another 10%. Roy was one of the singers. Roz was one of the singers. Who else is here? Rainey? No. John? Sim?
And died.
Di? So when they, and I didn't know what it was going to be, when they got up and sang, that to me was, because the words, I'll share a few of them, was the first thing he wrote to Beethoven's Ode to Joy. They describe what it is, sang that piece, from the ninth, that one. But some of the lines, I'll share one or two couplets, and I'm not going to attempt the tune. Our eyes shine with love reflected from the love within your eyes, love which is of itself certain, but is its own glad surprise. That's that to me is, I know I'm biased, but that to me is, I think, one of the most beautiful couplets that Francis ever wrote. I'll repeat it. Our eyes shine with love reflected from the love within your eyes, love which is of itself certain, but is its own glad surprise. Wonderful.
I might just say here that I had been pretty determined to have a small wedding, and Bernard's consolation to me when the guest list increased was, one day these people are going to be our best friends. I kind of screwed up my face, but it is indeed so.
Francis as a leader, through my eyes, led those, and only those, who wanted to follow and wanted to please and would attach importance to trying to get it right for Francis. He did not pull rank. He displayed rank because people gave him that rank. He was a worthy leader, a worthy example, and I personally don't believe that Francis ever played silly buggers or games with having this motive in order to achieve that. I think his motive was love, nurturing, encouragement, constructive criticism. Like in 1958, building this house, and I know I have told this story, was getting the property ready, hard physical work, particularly for me with a young body, wheelbarrows heavy, and lunch was 12 to 1, and Francis appeared at the tents at 1 minute past 1 and roasted me for what is the point of coming all the way from Melbourne if all you're going to do when you get here is to sleep. You know, he was pretty, but he'd taken on the responsibility of hosting Barber here, and he was fair dinkum, and he wouldn't stomach fools or sleepers.
It's a complex question, and I'll just give a very brief answer. In what Ross was talking about yesterday, he talked about Francis's roots, Francis's family's roots in the Fabian society and the egalitarian and communal and socialist undercurrents in the Western world. And there was a part of Francis that was powerfully egalitarian, extremely unpretentious. That was one aspect of Francis, and then there was another aspect that could be quite powerful, quite imperious, quite absolutely definite about the way he wanted things. So he was a combination of both incredibly humble and incredibly self-confident, and everything in between.
I followed Francis because I wanted to, and e.g. the Corduroy Road, that was one example where not on this issue. There were a few other issues around this property where I just refused to be part of his silly, stupid, impractical ideas. Here's a nice little aside about living with God, man. How different is the realism of staying with God to the romantic idea of sitting at the Master's feet? Staying with God is the hardest work one can do. One of the real proofs of Barber's greatness is the greatness of those who have been with him nearly all their lives. No ordinary man could stand it. They are above the saints. Even Barber sometimes betrays his admiration for them. He's been in India just a year, so after a couple of years. He's not putting himself, I think, in the position of the other Monday. I don't know. I'll keep reading. Sometimes I cannot help but wonder how it is that I am here among these men. Why I am here. I'm certainly no ornament anywhere, and here I certainly don't earn my tucker. Most of the time I'm about as stupid as an ox and not as useful. Only by doing what he is could Barber have held these men for a lifetime. Being greater than the saints, Barber has not allowed them the beatific experience of the saints. He has given them only hard work, poor accommodation, poor food, and little sleep, and the crushing weight of his divine love and boundless compassion. They have stayed simply because he is what he is, the perfect man, which is the totality of godhood in human form, and who is the only person in the world or beyond it who can make and keep them happy.